Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into the story behind a toolkit that pretty much taught a whole generation of programmers how to talk to computers. It's called NLTK, the Natural Language Toolkit, and its creation, way back over 2 decades ago, solved this massive problem in how we teach one of the most complex fields in computer science.
So think about this for a second. What happens when the tools you're supposed to be using are actually harder to learn than the subject itself? This question, it really gets to the heart of a huge problem that teachers of computational linguistics were facing back in the early 2000s.
You see, the core challenge sounds deceptively simple. How do you set up a practical, hands-on programming component for students? Sounds easy enough, right? But in reality, it was this massive wall that was getting in the way of learning.
Okay, so at the time, the way things were usually done was with this patchwork of different programming languages. You'd have to use a language like Prolog just for parsing, breaking down sentence structures. Then you'd have to switch over to something like Perl to process huge collections of text, and maybe even a third tool for analyzing the inner workings of words. Each one was a super specialized tool, and it was only good at its one specific job.
And the result of all this? Well, it was a total nightmare. It created this huge, unnecessary barrier. Students basically had to become experts in multiple programming languages just to finish a single project. The focus completely shifted away from the interesting linguistics part and onto just trying to get these different clunky systems to somehow talk to each other.
And listen, this wasn't just a headache for homework assignments. It made doing live interactive demos in the classroom practically impossible. So what happened? Lectures often turned into these really dull, theory-only presentations, and the students were left to figure out the entire practical side all by themselves.
So yeah, it was obvious that something had to change big time. The goal became finding a single, unified programming language that could handle everything, something that would make the whole learning process way more streamlined and focused on what actually mattered.
The folks who would eventually create NLTK, they had this very specific wish list. The language had to be easy for total beginners. It had to be fast for trying out new ideas, without some clunky compilation step. The code needed to be super readable, and it needed to be powerful, but not crazy complicated like C++. And, this was crucial, it absolutely needed good graphics capabilities for those in-class demos. And they found their perfect match, Python. It was just so readable, so intuitive, that it was famously described as executable pseudocode. I mean, what that basically means is the code itself was almost as clear as a plain English description of what it was supposed to be doing. So, with Python chosen as the foundation, they built the Natural Language Toolkit, or NLTK, and they built it from the ground up with one thing in mind above all else: education.
And you've got to understand, NLTK wasn't just a library of code you could download. No, it was a complete educational ecosystem. It had the software, of course, but it also came with tutorials and problem sets. Literally everything a student or a teacher would need, all bundled together in one place. It was true courseware.
Now, this is the part I find really cool: the design philosophy. The creators were just as clear about what NLTK wasn't as what it was. It didn't need to be the fastest or the most clever tool on the block. It just needed to be clear. It wasn't meant to do absolutely everything. It was meant to be a solid foundation that students could easily build on top of.
All right, so that's the theory. But what did this actually look like in a real classroom? How did it transform the assignments students are working on?
Well, for starters, all of that boring, tedious setup, gone. Just completely eliminated. By providing these predefined interfaces and data structures, it lets students get straight to the fun part, solving the actual natural language processing problem.
So let's take a classic assignment, like building a chunk parser, which is basically a tool to find simple phrases in a sentence. Instead of writing tons of complex code, students could just define a series of simple, readable rules. A chunk rule to grab the nouns, a chink rule to get rid of the verbs. It turned this really complex task into a fun, logical puzzle.
And this is where it gets really awesome, because it just unlocked so much creativity. I love this example. One student took a totally different approach. They just grouped the entire sentence into one giant chunk and then used rules to chisel away at the parts that weren't a noun phrase. They were focused on the linguistic logic, not fighting with the code. Just brilliant.
But it wasn't just about homework, not by a long shot. NLTK completely changed what could happen in the lecture hall. It brought these dull, theory-heavy lessons to life with vibrant, interactive graphical tools.
The chart parsing tool is a perfect example of this.
It let everyone in the room actually see a complex algorithm at work. You could see the sentence being analyzed, the chart of all the different possibilities, and the final grammatical tree. You could step through the process one click at a time and even ask what-if questions and see the results live. It made something really abstract feel tangible and interactive.
So when you boil it all down, NLTK's incredible and lasting impact comes directly from this unique education-first approach. That was the secret sauce.
The original authors point to 3 key things. 1, it was built for teaching first, period. 2, it was made to be accessible to students from both linguistics and computer science backgrounds. And 3, it was all built on Python, a language that's just perfect for rapid, readable, and exploratory programming.
And wow, what a legacy! We're talking over 20 years that NLTK has been the starting point for countless students and researchers diving into the world of natural language processing. It really wasn't just another toolkit, it was a purpose-built bridge for learners.
And all of this leaves us with a final thought. A big question, really. In an age where new, complex fields like AI are popping up faster than ever, NLTK's story makes you wonder, what's the next great tool we need to build to make these new frontiers accessible, understandable, and maybe even inspiring for everyone?